So Monday Night Raw just happened and something wild occurred at Monday Night Raw. Still in Perth, it was a wonder to have another morning show, but let's get to the good stuff, as you probably already know. And if you don't, why? Something really, really bad happened to Seth Rollins, who was, of course, on a high after beating Cody Rhodes for the Crown Jewel Championship. He was feeling himself on the top of the world as the quarterback of WWE until on the main event of Monday Night Raw when CM Punk won a number one contenders match to face Seth Rollins at the next Saturday night's main event, which is on early November, not exactly sure on the date. The Vision came out, laid him out. They stood tall at the end of the episode. It was all good. It was all going to be pretty exciting, pretty nice for Seth Rollins. And then, bam! Bron Breakker betrayed the Visionary and took over the Vision. That's right, Bron Breakker hit a spear on Seth Rollins at the end of Monday Night Raw, right as the credits, right as a little, produced by Paul Levesque and Lee Fitting. Right as those were rolling, we thought the show was over. Bron Breakker speared Seth Rollins in half. Now, of course, this had a lot of really big, excitement. I was mentioning how, the programming this last week had been a little bit more exciting than before. Obviously, Crown Jewel itself was a pretty good event. And now this happening on Monday Night Raw was just not expected at all. It is probably the most unexpected and exciting thing to happen since the Raw after Mania, probably. When Bron Breakker joined Seth Rollins right now, breaking the Vision apart, or at least changing leaders of the Vision. Now, let's actually discuss the effect of this, what is going to happen to the programming, and what's the reason? Why do this change right now? Of course, as I mentioned, the Vision started as a faction right after WrestleMania. Of course, at WrestleMania, Paul Heyman supported or betrayed both Roman and CM Punk in order to go with Seth Rollins. And the Raw after Mania, Bron Breakker joined in. He took Roman Reigns apart. He took him out. Then at Backlash, I think, that's when Bronson Reed came out. It hasn't really been, it hasn't even been a year, and this change already happened. So why do we think this is going on? Well, there's actually a couple of reportings, right? From Dave Meltzer, from Fightful, indicating that Seth Rollins is actually probably most likely hurt. So he was seen on the day after the event. Of course, Crown Jewel was Saturday. He was seen on Sunday walking around Perth with a sling on. If you don't know what a sling is, it's that thing you put on your arm when it's broken or dislocated or whatever. He was seen with a sling on. So yeah, he was probably hurt in some capacity. I think even people reported that they saw him walking backstage with a sling. So again, just a couple months ago, Seth Rollins did a whole story where he faked an injury, but that seemed like a story that was going somewhere. This doesn't seem like it's a story for any reason, right? This is very evidently either a impulse decision to try to drive up a number, or a decision that you have to make in order to adapt and pivot because of an injury, like is probably the case with Seth Rollins. Now, obviously, this sucks for him as a performer, because again, he was riding this high. He's World Heavyweight Champion. He just beat Cody Rhodes. He is essentially the main figure and the main character of Monday Night Raw. He's the biggest heel in WWE right now. So this happening sucks, but as it is often the case, usually when you have to adapt to, an injury or someone, whatever happening to them, that's when a lot of creativity comes around. I remember that's the whole reason of Kofi Mania happening. Mustafa Ali got injured right before Elimination Chamber, and then Kofi Kingston was put in that spot, and we got Kofi Mania. So these ways that they adapt, coming again because of an injury, often lead to a lot of very good creative like bursts, you know? So again, this angle, whatever the reason is, was really, really exciting. And yeah, it is most likely because Seth is sadly injured, but hopefully this impulse, this burst of creativity is gonna lead to a lot of good for all members involved. Obviously, the biggest one being Bron Breakker. You know, Bronson Reed is right behind him, and Paul Heyman. You know, not that he needs it, but he is involved in this big storyline, and he can help with these two younger guys to just establish themselves and, you know, all of them as a big force on Raw without needing Seth Rollins, which I guess was the whole point of the vision. Just, you know, later down the line, but they're going to have to do it right now, I guess. Yeah, so speaking about that, there was a reporting that, I think from Fightful, if I'm not mistaken, that the original plan was to do this, but next year. That the turn was initially at least pitched to happen in 2026, right? That's when Braun Breaker is going to turn on Seth. Obviously, because Seth is not going to be able, allegedly, not going to be able to be on TV, they just did it now in order to, I guess, have a strong heel on the brand. But yeah, so they're doing the story now. But what I find most interesting is what is going to happen in the near future, or what was originally meant to happen in the near future. Of course, there was a reporting like a couple days ago that the original plan, or one of the pitches, one of the plans that was proposed for War Games was Seth, obviously Division, Braun and Bronson, Austin Theory for some reason, and Brock Lesnar, which that one does kind of make sense. Obviously, Seth is out. So I imagine, you know, Paul Heyman is there. Also, Paul Heyman didn't seem thrilled about this. It didn't seem like he planned to do this with Braun and Bronson. So maybe him bringing his guy Brock Lesnar to kind of like either take over the group or protect himself or just as a favor to Braun and Bronson. That could be a couple of things that they can do. But yeah, if the original plan was to go with them, I assume Seth was going to keep the title because, as I mentioned at the beginning, this all happened after a number one contenders match. Now, something I did, you know, find of note is that CM Punk a couple of weeks ago had mentioned that he wanted to end the year as world champion, that he was going to beat Seth Rollins before the end of the year. Now, he did say that he wanted to do it on Netflix, like on Raw, which I don't think was ever going to be the case. And of course, the reporting a couple scenes like before the match of Crown Jewel, I think, was that it was going to be Seth versus Punk on Saturday night's main event. So I also had mentioned in other videos that personally I felt that the storyline had run its course, that there was no way of extending Punk and Seth beyond this year, right? The storyline is already kind of dry. You know, the AJ Lee thing kind of gave it a little bit of life, but there's really no way that you can just keep going with these two guys another 6 months. So I do think the original plan was for CM Punk to get the title before the end of the year at Saturday Night's Main Event, or whatever, an episode of Raw, whatever, which means he would have probably walked into War Games as champion and Seth Rollins without anything. And that would have also created some turmoil within the division. Now, again, that's no longer happening. So, is it possible that CM Punk still wins the World Heavyweight Championship at Saturday Night's Main Event? Obviously, that would imply that Seth has to vacate the title, and I assume it would be Punk versus Braun Breaker at Saturday Night's Main Event. I assume they're going to do like some sort of tournament to get another number one contender for that match. It's a lot that's up in the air, right? Again, this is a freak situation where they have to adapt on the fly. They have to be adapting live to what's happening. But we do have a hint of what was going to happen in that Punk said that he wanted the title before the end of the year. So I do think that was always a possibility. I'm not going to give a high percentage, But I was pretty convinced that Punk was going to win that championship, you know, around this time, around Saturday night's main event, Survivor Series. That one just made sense to me. Now, whatever they're gonna do at War Games, it's all up in the air. I don't know if they're gonna do a 5 versus 5. If they don't have Seth Rollins, maybe they're gonna do a 4 versus 4. Maybe they're just not gonna do War Games with those guys. Maybe they're gonna pivot to another team. Maybe the Wyatts and MFTs. I don't know if that's a possibility. I don't know if that makes sense. It's obviously not nearly as hot of a story as Division, but just bringing in Brock and Austin Theory and then another guy just to have 5 guys, that's a little weird. There was also reporting that maybe Jacob Fatu was going to be on the face team, maybe Jey Uso, maybe LA Knight, so there's a lot of baby faces that could be on that team. The problem is with the heels. What is the Division going to be doing in the near future, in order to just get everything into place so that things make sense going forward at the end of the year. Now, as the reporting said, if the plan was originally gonna be from Bron Breakker to betray Seth Rollins until next year, was that gonna be, Seth Rollins the babyface, Bron Breakker as the heel? Was it gonna be Seth heel and Bron Breakker babyface, kind of like a Batista Triple H thing? I always figured that the Vision story was going to end up exactly like Evolution. Was going to be, Seth Rollins with his reign of terror. Eventually, Bron Breakker breaks out into this big babyface that Seth cannot stop. And it was going to bite him in the ass, and he was going to get the world title. That's what I always thought was going to happen. Obviously, plans are different. I have no idea what's on the horizon for WrestleMania. Another report, apparently, is that one of the matches planned, or pitched at the very least, was Seth Rollins versus Roman Reigns, which makes all the sense of the world. But if that's the match, then was it going to be for the title or no title? And if it was going to be for the title, then what about CM Punk? It's all up in the air. When we saw in the show on Netflix, on Real, that there's a lot of different ideas that they have around this time, and it is October, November, December where they nail down what they're going to do for WrestleMania. So anything could happen. Obviously, plans can change, and things like an injury with your world champion obviously has to change, plans and directions. But looking at the bright side, this is the most exciting. I have seen a lot of people, obviously including myself. This is the most excited I have seen these people in the product, in the show, And it sucks that it took an injury to get that, but it is really captivating, and it is really, you wonder what's going to happen next. I haven't wondered what is going to happen on the next episode of Monday Night Raw in a long, long time. So, sucks for Seth, but I do want to see what happens next. So what do you want to see happen next? Please tell me down below. Like, comment, subscribe, that thing, and have a good one.